Rishi Sunak, the focus being largely on maintaining the cross-party consensus over Ukraine.
Yes, and this comes as the Labour leader gets tough on rebel MPs, suspending 7 who broke ranks and voted to scrap the policy on 2 child benefits. We'll have the latest.
A soldier is left with serious injuries in hospital after reports of what is being called a frenzied knife attack outside his army barracks in Kent. We'll bring you the latest on the ground.
And if you're struggling to get a doctor's appointment, it might get a whole lot worse. GPs are set to cut the number of appointments they offer each day in a further row over pay.
Of course, Prime Minister's questions started with both the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and indeed the Leader of the Liberal Democrats as well, making their thoughts known over that horrific knife attack yesterday evening on a British soldier. Still not that much known about what went on. We're going to be looking at this issue, this big and developing story throughout this programme.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely horrific what we're hearing from that incident. We don't know the motive yet. The police so far have not said it's terror-related. We understand there maybe have been an arrest already, but we're going to bring you the very, very latest from our Home and Security editor very shortly indeed. Please do get in touch as well. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But first, your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer accused the previous government of losing control of Britain's borders as he took part in his first PMQs as Prime Minister. Reform UK's Rupert Lowe quizzed the PM on Labour's migration plans, claiming that a failure to control the borders has damaged and disrupted communities. The Prime Minister hit back, saying he disagreed with Miss Lowe's numbers, but conceded that small boat crossings in the Channel are a serious issue.
I'm not sure I agree with his numbers, but look, I do think that it's serious that the previous government lost control of our borders. Record numbers have crossed the Channel since the Leader of the Opposition, when he was Prime Minister for 18 months, 50,000 people crossed the Channel. It's a serious issue that requires a serious answer. And that is why we will set up our Border Security Command to take down the gangs that are running this vile trade. What we won't do is waste further time on a gimmick that cost a fortune and remove just 4 volunteers.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak used today's Prime Minister's questions to call for tougher sanctions on Russia. The Leader of the Opposition said the work of the previous government had laid the groundwork for stronger action against Moscow, which he says would help fund Ukraine's reconstruction. And taking a lighter tone, the former Prime Minister joked as he sent best wishes to Britain's Olympians.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join with the Prime Minister in expressing my shock at the attack on a British soldier? Our thoughts are with him and his family as we wish him a speedy recovery. And I also join with the Prime Minister in his warm words about our Olympic athletes. Yeah. I've no doubt that after years of training, focus and dedication, they'll bring back many gold medals. Although, to be honest, I'm probably not the first person they want to hear advice from on how to win. But I'm glad in our exchanges.
Nominations open this evening to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly announced last night he's running to take the party's top job. In a video emphasising his credentials, the former Foreign and Home Secretary said the Tories need to re-establish a reputation as the party that helps grow the economy and achieve their aspirations. He's the first to announce a leadership bid, and any challengers will need to get in quick before nominations close on Monday. GB News spoke with people in Stamford about their thoughts on who should take over as Tory leader.
I think they should go bankrupt. That would be rather lovely. There are very few decent people in the Tory party. I certainly don't want Liz Truss or Johnson back again.
Well, they should be looking to appeal to their core voters and the policies that they present. Taxation for one issue, a main issue, a reason why I failed to vote for them this time.
There are no statesmen anymore. I don't consider Starmer to be a statesman or statesman material.
In other news, police in Kent say the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Gillingham is not terror-related. Witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening. Locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says she's appalled by the attack.
This is an appalling attack on a serving soldier. My thoughts go to him and to his family, wishing him a speedy recovery. This is an ongoing police investigation by Kent Police. It's really important that they have everyone's support in this investigation. But this was a just appalling attack on a serving soldier, and I know that the whole country will be thinking of him and his family and wishing him a speedy recovery.
And divers discovered a bronze cannon on the shipwreck of a warship that was destroyed by a gunpowder explosion in 1665. The 17th century ship called the London formed part of a convoy sent in 1660 to collect Charles II from the Netherlands and restore him to the throne. The prized cannon was discovered buried in silt and clay on the seabed, where the protected wreck lies in 2 parts off Southend Pier in Essex. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:07. Now, a British Army soldier is in hospital with serious injuries after being stabbed near Brompton Barracks in Kent last night.
The victim, who is in his 40s, is said to have been in uniform when he was attacked by a man wearing a ski mask. The incident is not currently being treated as a terror attack.
Yes, Chief of General Staff General Sir Rowley Walker says he is deeply saddened by the horrific and unprovoked attack in Gillingham.
Well, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White is at the scene for us. Mark, what do we know?
Well, just in the last half hour, a team of forensics officers have arrived at the scene to begin their examination in detail of the scene of that attack on this army officer just before the evening where that officer suffered. Those forensics officers are carrying out, as they always do, a methodical check inch by inch of the scene where that stabbing took place. We can bring you actually some doorbell footage, the sound from that more than anything else, of the moments where this attack was taking place. A warning to our viewers and listeners that it is distressing because very audibly you can hear the screams as that attack is taking place. Let's have a listen. Well, I mean, clearly, just obviously very distressing there. And the doorbell in question belonged to one of the neighbours here, just a couple of doors up from the scene, Alex Reynolds, who spoke to me a little earlier, and he told me that really he wanted to go to help, but he wasn't prepared really for what he saw. This is what he told me.
Thought immediately that it was perhaps just a scuffle in the street, perhaps on the neighbouring street. But as the screams became more harrowing and piercing, you realised that it was something more serious. I think initially my father said not to go out, but a minute later I went out to sit to the corner and could see a good 6 or 7 people around the victim, around the body that was lying on the pavement.
And the wife of Alex Reynolds, Natasha Reynolds, was actually just coming home at the time when as well. The family have lived here for a couple of years. They are one of the few families around here who are not military families. They've always felt quite safe, but this is what Natasha Reynolds told us about what she saw in the moments after she arrived.
I was driving back home from work, and as soon as I turned on the road, I saw plenty of cars, and I thought something happened. When I approached the house, I saw people standing, and lots of police, ambulance, and also my family was standing outside, and they said there was a stabbing here. I was really shocked because this is something unusual for this area.
Well, clearly the attack on an officer, a soldier wearing his uniform so close to a barracks, has very many people concerned, understandably, about the potential for this being terrorist motivated. At the moment, the police say they're not looking at a terrorist motivation. However, that might change. Previously, when we've had incidents where they've not thought initially that it was terrorist related, they found materials pointing to an ideology. So let's wait for the fullness of time for that investigation, which is still in its early stages, to see what it actually uncovers about what on earth possessed this individual to jump off a bike, to stab a soldier multiple times and then to flee. He was arrested in nearby Rochester. About half an hour later, there's a crime scene at that location in Rochester as well, and police say that several knives were recovered from that scene.
Really horrific story here, Mark. Thank you so much for all the details there and for speaking to those eyewitnesses as well. I really appreciate it.
Yes, that doorbell footage, very distressing indeed, hearing those screams. As Mark said, someone has been arrested. The forensics are there trying to suss out what exactly happened. But yes, horrifying for the local residents and, of course, the soldier who suffered this brutal attack.
And absolutely right to not jump down any conclusions at this stage, to not say that this is necessarily terrorism, but as Mark was saying, sometimes these things can be determined to have been terror-related or otherwise, perhaps even days after they occur.
Yes, and if we find out anything regarding the possible motives, Mark White will be straight back with us to let us know, so we'll keep you up to date.
Now, in parliamentary news, a Labour member of Parliament suspended for rebelling over the two-child benefit cap last night says she was the victim of a macho virility test.
Right, Zara Sultana and 6 others were stripped of the whip for backing an SNP motion to abolish the welfare limit.
The SNP says that Labour has failed its first major test in government by choosing not to deliver meaningful change from years of what they've determined to be Tory misrule.
Right, well, let's cross live to GBNews political correspondent Catherine Forster, who's in Downing Street. Very tough action from the new Prime Minister here.
Yes, good afternoon, Tom and Emily. It really was a first streak of ruthlessness on display from the new Prime Minister. And yes, there's 7 Labour MPs who are now suspended. They've lost the whip for a minimum of 6 months, after which time it will be reviewed. But I think, obviously Sir Keir Starmer has got a massive majority, a working majority of 181. And I think what this is about is trying to send a message to backbench MPs who might think that because there's a huge majority, they can sort of vote how they like, regardless, because they know that obviously the government won't be defeated on these votes. It's about sending a message to them that that sort of disobedience, if you like, will not be tolerated. So Zara Sultana, one of them, but 6 others as well, including John McDonnell, who of course was Shadow Chancellor under Jeremy Corbyn, Rebecca Long-Bailey, another voice from the left of the party who was very popular under Jeremy Corbyn, and others. But in the lobby briefing after Prime Minister's questions, and what a different Prime Minister's questions it was, the Prime Minister's spokesman, they were asked over and over again about this. Initially they said, well, this was a decision for the Chief Whip, but of course they admitted that the Prime Minister had been consulted, and it seemed to be the particular issue is that they had voted against the King's speech, fundamentally, the King's speech which outlined the programme for government. So this is seen as a particularly indefensible move. I have to say, I was quite surprised. I hadn't really expected that 7 MPs would have the whip stripped off them so quickly, but there we are. Let's see, because there's plenty of dissent, of course, within the Labour Party. We heard a little bit in a couple of the questions. One was about trans people and the proposed ban on puberty blockers. An MP not happy about that at all. Another MP not very happy about the party's position on Gaza. We're going to hear a lot more of that, and the Prime Minister is very keen to stamp his authority.
Really interesting to see these putative divisions, splits within the Labour Party across these different fronts. Of course, doesn't matter so much now that there's a massive majority, but what sort of seeds are these planting for later down the line? Catherine Forster, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, in the studio to discuss this further is political commentator Nathaniel Ogunniyi, who joins us now. Nathaniel, thank you very much indeed. It's quite interesting, isn't it, how tough Keir Starmer has been when it came to this amendment, this rebellion. 7 MPs suspended, just like that.
Yeah.
Is that the way to govern?
So it is quite decisive action. He's taken quite strong action here, but I suppose the way to govern would have been to convince these MPs of the right course beforehand. The fact that they voted against you and you've now had to suspend them tells me that those backroom negotiations failed. Tells me that Keir Starmer is starting to lose control of his own party. And
only 7, though.
Well, so this is the thing. He has a massive working majority, of course, and so can kind of the fact that 7 MPs are gone doesn't really affect parliamentary business on a day-to-day basis. But it does tell us that Labour's lines around conservative chaos and things like that are actually being reflected back to them now. Now we can see that the Labour Party aren't quite as united as they promised us they were.
Although, are we focusing too much on the 7 Labour MPs who voted directly for this SNP amendment, and not enough on the dozens, I think it was near enough 70 Labour MPs who did not vote. Now, some of them will have legitimate reasons to be absent from Parliament and be what's known as slipped, but others will have made a conscious abstention last night.
Yeah, so you're right. I think a good number of them were slipped or were paired with other MPs, so they didn't vote, but another MP didn't vote, so it sort of cancels themselves out. But yeah, there is a larger body of MPs who are opposed to these measures. And the truth is, if you try and push through a radical on any measure government, then you will have MPs who are opposed to you. Labour are likely to have similar difficulties when it comes to planning. They're likely to have similar difficulties when it comes to some of their plans for tax. So, this is the first of many areas that we'll begin to see Labour MPs rebelling against their government. Does that mean their government will lose, however? I don't think so.
Now, we were watching PMQs a little bit earlier on this channel, and it was all very cosy. It was all very cordial. There was a huge amount of consensus. Rishi Sunak decided to give all of those questions relating to Ukraine and military efforts there and our support, etc. What did you make of that?
So I suppose because Rishi Sunak is the interim leader, I suppose he's not quite leading the attacks on Labour as I think, say, Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch as Tory leader in the future might do, right? I think he's sort of, almost steering the ship, just waiting for the full-time reinforcement. I do think there are areas of Labour policy where a future Conservative leader can press. I mentioned planning briefly. I mentioned tax. Labour said they weren't going to raise taxes. We'll see what happens at the budget expected later in the year. Equally on planning, they said they want to build massive numbers of new homes and new towns, but actually it's possible that new MPs will oppose those in their developments. And actually, if we look at the shadow cabinet, a good number of them have opposed planning developments in their own constituencies. So they're saying one thing on one side, but not quite living up to it in their local areas. So we will see, I think, as the parliamentary term progresses, some slightly more political attacks.
Now, you've mentioned 2 names there, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick, 2 people who seem to be leading in many of these polls, although not that many polls have yet been published. Only one candidate has so far declared, and that's James Cleverly. How many people are we expecting to actually enter this leadership race?
Yeah, so I think we'll probably get above 5. We'll probably get above 5 in terms of numbers. I think there are a few others who have been rumoured. You know, Victoria Atkins, I think, has received the support of the former Deputy PM Oliver Dowden, and so she's sort of seen as leading it from the left of the party. Equally, you have Tom Toog on that side as well. But we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see.
Do you need a unity? Does the Conservative Party need a unity candidate, which James cleverly says he is, or do they need a barnstorming Conservative?
So I think we do need a unity candidate, although the important thing about that is what are you unifying around? You know, there's no point in unifying around decay. So I think it's important that we have a leader who can unite various factions.
Well, unifying, I guess I think that sort of translates to centrist.
No. So I don't think the Conservative Party can win from there. I think there has to be a strong Conservative vision, you know, built around economic growth, built around individual liberty. I think if you go for a slightly more centrist position, you can't do centrism better than centrists. The only path for the Conservative Party to victory is on the right.
And of course, what we've likely seen over the last 4 years was a government that spoke from the right. And spoke a lot about illegal migration, stopping the boats, Rwanda, talking about cutting taxes as well. But when it came to policy, they governed from the centre. Taxes went up. Those flights to Rwanda never went off. Immigration rose. It seemed like they said one thing and did another. Perhaps the biggest answer here is actually keeping promises.
Yes, so any government that doesn't live up to their promises will soon find themselves outside of power. I think that's a lesson that Labour will be keen to learn over the coming days. But I think it's really important for the next Conservative leader, whoever they are, to demonstrate that in government they would be credible. In government they wouldn't make promises they can't keep. You know, in government when they say something, it would actually happen. The gap between messaging and reality, I think, it needs to get smaller. OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Nathaniel Ogoniyi, political commentator. Thank you for your time.
Well, coming up, the royal family's profits have reached record highs. We're outside Buckingham Palace with all of the details after this.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Khloe Kardashian has come under fire after posting a picture of her 6-year-old daughter wearing a full face of makeup.
Yeah, the reality TV star said the youngster was participating in a dance recital and that wasn't an everyday occurrence.
So this morning we're asking, is it ever OK to let children wear makeup?
Well, joining us now is journalist Julie Cook. So, Julie, it's a child wearing full rouge, bright red lipstick, hair tied back, looking very, very stylised, very much, I think, like a young adult. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing with small children?
Oh, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, first of all, in Khloe Kardashian's case, it was a dance recital, so it was very much a kind of performance element to it. She said herself in her post, it wasn't something they do every day. She was taking part in a dance activity. So, you know, I think she's vindicated on that front. But I've let my daughter play with makeup since she was 3. When she was 3, she showed a distinct interest in my makeup palettes, going through my stuff. She's 10 now, and while I don't let her wear a full face like a drag queen, I do let her wear, you know, a bit of mascara on a weekend if she wants to. I don't see any harm in it.
Clearly, if you're a child of a Kardashian who's paid millions of dollars to endorse cosmetics, you know, that's part of the fabric of their family. My concern, though, Julie, is putting those pictures on social media where people can see them. We live in an age now where, you know, wrong-uns are scouring the internet all the time.
A lot of girls do enjoy putting makeup on. It's almost like a self-expression thing. It's like painting on a canvas. They're just trying to be a bit artistic. I don't think it's necessarily as sort of sinister as we're making out. And I think as long as you're not posting pictures everywhere or putting them at risk of harm, I don't see any danger.
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:25, and profit from the royal family's property and land holdings have more than doubled to a record £1.1 billion. That's according to Buckingham Palace's annual accounts.
Well, the report includes the cost of the coronation and all the visits made by the royals over the last year. Interesting to note that fewer foreign trips were made in the year to March 2024, reflecting a need to stay closer to home during a period in which both the King and the Princess of Wales spent time in hospital for cancer treatment, of course.
Well, we're now joined by GB News national reporter Charlie Peters, who is outside Buckingham Palace for us. Charlie, break this down for us. What does it all mean?
Well, that 1.1 billion you just referred to, the royal family and the household, they won't see that for a couple more years because the sovereign grant, what the Treasury gives back to the royal family, is done by the financial year 2 years prior. So the £86.3 million that the royal family spent last year is based on the surplus from the Crown estate from 2 years ago. That was £312 million. So if you think that your tax bill was bad, the royal family paid 75% tax. That's a 15% core grant, which is around £53 million, but the additional 10% that they got back was also for the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace behind me, which is taking 10 years to resurface. That's going to cost into the hundreds of millions, well over £300 million. But what else did that money go on from the surplus from the Crown estate? Well, first and foremost, the coronation. That was the highlight event of the previous financial year. That was £800,000 of royal expenditure, much of that going on the fittings of robes, of course, the royal procession, and also refitting the imperial crown for the king. We also saw the sovereign grant report reveal that the expenditure was higher than the grant, at over £89 million. Now, where do they get the additional resources? The royal family is given a surplus from £10 million from receipts of those visiting their palaces and castles across the United Kingdom. So that allowed them to spend a bit more cash. And then there's £4.2 million on royal engagements, and that's all travel. They've spent that money on carrying out their official duties across the country and indeed overseas, with a trip to Kenya costing £170,000. So a significant investment there. But in this report this year, the palace is keen to point out the changes they're making to reduce their costs and also to be more environmentally friendly. We know that King Charles is known as the Green King in many circles, and he's using more sustainable aviation fuel for many of those chartered trips and helicopter visits to reach remote corners of the UK. We've also learnt that the leaking roof in Windsor Castle has been fixed, and it's been replaced also with some solar panels to help reduce those costs. While the royal household across its estate used less electricity in the last year, their electricity bill, like many of us around the country, doubled. So they spent £1.1 million on electricity last year. That's quite the lecky bill to get in the year. Beyond all of that, though, beyond all the expenditure that we've seen, the report also focuses quite keenly on diversity. Now, this is something that the monarchy is keen to point out. Perhaps it's a sign of the monarchy moving with modern political trends, possibly a rather controversial move, but they've pointed out that 11.4% of the staff at Buckingham Palace are now from ethnic minority backgrounds. They're hoping to reach a 15% by next year. So there's a racial quota in place for staffing at Buckingham Palace. I think many people aren't aware of that, and staff costs at the palace are well over £31 million, over 500 staff there, but they're keen to point out that the staff and the workforce are becoming more diverse.
Goodness me, that's very interesting. And does this report give us an idea of how much the royal family is benefiting the rest of us, the British economy? How much money are they bringing into our country?
Well, the Crown Estate, which develops all this cash, which is given over to the Treasury. It's worth £16 billion, so it's a rather large property and land portfolio. It's generated £3 billion for the Treasury in recent years. Of course, as I said, they give over everything they earn in their surplus to the Exchequer, and then His Majesty's Treasury gives back a portion, quite a small portion you might say, at 85% tax, for them to then spend on household duties, travel and all the rest of it. But also often, Emily, I think when we look into the cost of the Sovereign Grant Report, people focus so much on the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And it's bringing out that bigger picture that so many in the royal family want us to look at. It's not just about cash here, it's about what the royal family means to Britain.
Goodness me, the level of tax that we levy on the royal family, it's more than North Sea oil and gas.
It's an outrage, but they're making their Bentley state cars run on biofuels. Oh, so that's good, isn't it?
That's very King Charles.
Right, coming up, President Joe Biden is set to make a key speech from the Oval Office. That's following his step down from the US presidential race. Is Kamala Harris up for the job? We'll be putting that to Joe Biden's former chief of staff. That's next after your headlines.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Police in Kent say the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Gillingham is not terror-related. Officers are continuing their investigations after witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening. Locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. The Prime Minister says he's shocked and appalled by the attack. Sir Keir Starmer accused the previous government of losing control of Britain's borders as he took part in his first PMQs as Prime Minister. Reform UK's Rupert Lowe quizzed the PM on Labour's migration plans, claiming that a failure to control the borders has damaged and disrupted communities. The Prime Minister hit back and conceded that channel crossings are a serious issue, but laid blame on the Tory party.
I'm not sure I agree with his numbers, but look, I do think that it's serious that the previous government lost control of our borders. Record numbers have crossed the Channel since the Leader of the Opposition, when he was Prime Minister for 18 months, 50,000 people crossed the Channel. It's a serious issue that requires a serious answer. And that is why we will set up our Border Security Command to take down the gangs that are running this vile trade. What we won't do is waste further time on a gimmick that cost a fortune and remove just 4 volunteers.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak took a lighter tone, joking as he sent best wishes to Britain's Olympians.
And I also join with the Prime Minister in his warm words about our Olympic athletes. Yeah. I've no doubt that after years of training, focus and dedication, they'll bring back many gold medals. Although, to be honest, I'm probably not the first person they want to hear advice from on how to win. But I'm glad in our exchanges.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2919 and €1.1907. The price of gold is £1,872.38 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,163 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Fine at first for many of us today, with some warm sunshine, especially in the east, although there will be the odd shower here as well. It then turns cloudier from the west by the end of the day as a frontal system pushes some outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland, West Wales, western parts of England and Scotland. Already the skies are turning cloudy in the west, and by the afternoon some outbreaks of rain arrive into the west of Wales, Cornwall, Northern Ireland. Western Scotland, odd shower, and the odd shower in the east of England as well. But actually here, plenty of sunny spells and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24 to 25 Celsius across a wide area, 26 in one or two spots. Cooler in the west as the cloud thickens and these outbreaks of rain turn up. Some heavy bursts into the southwest by the evening, and the rain will be fairly showery, so it'll be on and off, but there will be a lot of rain around, and that rain heading into Cumbria, southwest and west Scotland, Northern Ireland by the evening. Eastern Scotland clinging on to some late sunshine, highs here of 20 Celsius, 17 by the evening. And into the evening, many areas will see that cloud thicken as the frontal system moves west to east. And we're going to see those outbreaks of rain continuing with the cloud progressively lowering through the night to result in widespread hill fog and coastal mist by dawn. With the extensive cloud cover and a southwesterly airflow, temperatures will stay up in the mid-teens. So a relatively mild night and a warmish start to Thursday, even if it is gloomy out there. It will be particularly grotty around southwestern shores with a lot of mist and low cloud, some early drizzle, some outbreaks of more heavy rain moving along the south coast, showery further north, and some brighter spells emerging towards the end of the day.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm John Vincent. In Perth and Kinross, we've got the usual queues on the M90 northbound at the Broxton roundabout. Queues on the M6 southbound in Cumbria. 2 lanes closed for an accident between junction 40 Penrith and 39 for Shap. We've got slow traffic on the M61 southbound in Manchester at the Swinton interchange. Queues on the M20 coastbound in Kent. 2 lanes closed for an accident at junction 3. That's the M26 in the roadworks area that has happened. Queues on the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire. That's due to earlier debris on the road at junction 19 for Watford. We're seeing slow traffic on the M25, firstly anti-clockwise in Essex between junction 26 Waltham Abbey and 25 Enfield. That again is in the roadworks area. It's also slow on the M25 anti-clockwise in Buckinghamshire between junction 17 Maple Cross and 16 the M40.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 1. Now, President Joe Biden will address the nation, the United States, that is, today, ending his bid for... No, I'm sure he'll be delighted if anyone else is listening. But this is after he ended his bid for a second term just 4 months shy of the election.
Yes, the 81-year-old took to X, or Twitter, saying he will address what lies ahead and how he will finish the job for the American people. This, of course, follows days of speculation and questions asking just where the president had been.
Well, joining us now is Joe Biden's former Chief of Staff, Susan Platt. Thank you, sir, for joining us so early in the morning for the United States of America. Susan, yes, it is. Why haven't we seen Joe Biden since he made his announcement? Not a photograph, just one phone call.
Well, he's had COVID, and I think, you know, you have to isolate when you have COVID. But I believe people saw him yesterday boarding Air Force One and entering the White House, and so he's ready to go for his speech tonight. And I think we're all excited to hear what he has to say on how he wants to complete his term and what he needs to finish the job, as he says.
Well, you've worked for him yourself. What do you expect him to tell the nation?
I think that he will tell the nation, and I know that we all who have worked with him and love him know this, that he cares deeply about our country. He cares deeply about our rights, and that he wants to move forward and make it easier for average Americans to not just to get ahead, but get ahead as much as they can on his watch in terms of being inclusive and making a better living for their families, more education, and remaining with our rights. Kamala Harris is talking about, she is a perfect prosecutor for this case because she's talking about moving forward with our rights, not getting them taken away as Donald Trump has tried to do and has done.
There'll be plenty of people who think that it's right that Joe Biden steps aside for his vice president in this race, that he's looking a bit more tired than he did 4 years ago. He clearly isn't as sharp with his speech as he was 4 years ago. But there are some who say if he can't stand in this presidential election and he's not able to be as quick-witted as perhaps he once was, why can he continue in the job of president right through until January next year? There is some discussion that the 25th Amendment could be invoked.
Well, the Republican lies and deception machine is working at overtime on all this. While he will no longer be a candidate for president, he and I think there was a concern that would he be able to handle the task, the job for the next 4 years, should he be reelected? We've answered that question. He's answered that question. And he's fully capable and fully vigorous now, back recovered from COVID, to move forward in the next 6 months and to help his vice president win election as our president in January for inauguration.
And should we turn to Kamala Harris? It looks likely that she'll be the one facing off with Donald Trump for the big job in the States. There's been a lot made of her decision to skip a Congress meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, of course. Was that a snub? And does this indicate that perhaps there will be a change in policy towards the Middle East, specifically towards Israel, if she does become president?
Well, last I've heard was she is intending to meet with him. I believe it's tomorrow, but I could be wrong, as is President Biden. And I think, Joe Biden's been working very hard to work out some sort of agreement to end this conflict in Gaza. And I'm sure she will follow suit with him.
It's obviously not an easy decision to reach to throw the towel in on the most powerful job in the world. What will those discussions behind the scenes have been like with Joe Biden? Obviously, there had been private meetings with Congress people. Nancy Pelosi, clearly a key factor there. Why did it take so long?
Well, it's a big decision. It's a big job. And I think he had to make considerations of his family and the country. And he ultimately, I don't think it will matter in the long run how it took him 2 or 3 weeks to come to the conclusion. It's fine. I think right now we've got the momentum and the timing is perfect. The momentum is on our side.
The timing is perfect.
I have never seen
this has thrown the Democratic Party into the lurch. There's not enough time to have a Democratic primary now. And Kamala Harris will be untested as a candidate. She didn't. Not a single vote was cast for Kamala Harris in 2020 in those primaries.
Of course it will. Well, she's been Joe Biden's partner, and they were both elected to the office of president and vice president. And if you watched her give her barn burner of a speech yesterday, she is clearly up to the job of prosecuting the case against Donald Trump. And as she mentioned, she's prosecuted predators, fraudsters, and cheaters, of which he is all three.
Susan, you must admit there may well be some disappointed Democrats out there that they don't have a choice here.
Well, they elected delegates to the convention. The delegates have voted. The majority has voted to make her our nominee. And I think everybody's just thrilled as they can be. Her campaign raised over $81 million in 48 hours. With, I think, something like 400,000 more volunteers. So that speaks for itself, and it speaks volumes about how people feel about Kamala Harris being our nominee.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the sort of social media wave behind Kamala Harris, all of the meme videos, the viral TikToks. It seems like perhaps she's a lightened Generation Z in a way that perhaps Joe Biden never could. But there are legitimate questions now of who is the real Kamala Harris. In 2020, when she ran for the position of Democrat nominee, she wanted to institute a Green New Deal of trillions of dollars of spending. She wanted to, in some cases, defund police departments, and indeed she wanted universal healthcare for all Americans. Does she hold any of those positions today?
I don't believe she ever said anything about defunding the police department. That's just a complete distortion from the MAGA side of the Republican Party. She has been Joe Biden's partner for 3.5 years. They have done amazing things by all standards for this country and for our standard of living and our rights, and she'll continue to do that. Should she be elected? Now, it's going to be a close election, as they all are anymore, but I guarantee you she's got the momentum right now. The Democrats have united at warp speed, and we're ready to go.
Well, it does appear she's ahead with the current polling anyway, the very latest. Thank you very much, Susan Platt. Really great to have you on, Joe Biden's former Chief of Staff.
Yeah, really interesting to see how that will go forward. Obviously, it can be the case that Kamala is ahead in the popular vote, but behind in the states because of the Electoral College. But it is interesting, this sort of online phenomenon. Kamala Harris, her sort of Twitter rapid rebuttal account has got a new header image, which is in this lime green with a sort of fuzzy word of Kamala Harris, all in the style of the singer Charlie XCX and her new album Brat, which seems to be amalgamating with the Kamala campaign, tapping into some online magic.
Yes, I saw a TikTok that was her, dancing and maybe looking cool, and then it cut to Donald Trump awkwardly moving. So it's like, Gen Z, who would you prefer? Someone cool.
Well, could Gen Z swing it for Kamala? Perhaps.
Possible.
If they get out of bed to vote.
Coming up, a British Olympic medalist has been banned from the Olympics. This after a video emerged showing her whipping a horse multiple times. We'll have more on that very soon.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
Well, I'm joined now by royal biographer and former royal photographer, Ian Lloyd. Ian,
hello, Jacob.
Thank you
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be great, isn't it? The opportunity to go around and see where the King comes onto the balcony from. Really interesting insight to how Buckingham Palace works.
It's exciting. I went yesterday, there was a press preview, and the thing that struck me first of all is that if you're the King or the late Queen and you're on the balcony, you can't see the Mall. I mean, we all see people coming down from the top, thousands of people crowding in towards Buckingham Palace. They can't see it because of this great monument to Queen Victoria called the Queen Victoria Memorial, or they call it the wedding cake, but it blocks the view. So apparently the King has a TV in there. And the late Queen did as well. So what they do is they when they're waiting to come on, they're watching the TV to see how the crowd's getting nearer the palace. And the other thing that struck me is when we were on it looking down, is you can actually see individual faces in the crowd out there because we looked out, So they do get a good view of what's happening directly underneath the palace,
So they can see individuals. So if there's a friendly face in the crowd, they can see that person and possibly even wave. But they can't see that enormous mass of people you get at the big events that goes back towards Admiralty Arch.
The other thing I learned is there's a great historical link because the person that put the east wing on the palace, because it was originally 3 sides, and Queen Victoria had, of course, 9 children, so they had to build a 4th side for all the nurseries and things. Edward Blord was the architect, but the master builder was Thomas Cubitt.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is coming up to 10 to 2. And a disturbing video has emerged on social media of Team GB Olympian Charlotte Dujardin whipping a horse.
Yes, the video shows Charlotte hitting the horse with a long whip at least 25 times during a lesson for another rider.
The six-time Olympic medalist pulls out of Paris 2024 following suspension from the competition.
Well, joining us now is former editor of Horse and Hound, Lucy Higginson. Lucy, this is a video clip that has shocked a lot of people, I think it's fair to say. As far as you know, is this common practice or is this very much out of the ordinary?
It's very much not the norm. It's profoundly shocked everybody in the equestrian world, because people may infer that this sort of behaviour is more common, and it really isn't. And horse sports has worked really hard to try and convey how horses are trained, how they're bred, how they're selected, how they're produced over years and years and years. And almost every rider who makes a living out of sport comes into the sport because they love horses. A lot of them work incredibly hard and don't lead a very comfortable life themselves to put their horses before themselves in terms of their upkeep and so on. So this is just immensely shocking, and everybody in the British and international equestrian world feels really sad and let down by it.
How has she responded to this video, to this shocking turn of events? Obviously, such a decorated Olympian.
Well, she's put out a statement that makes it clear how profoundly sorry she is. She says it's absolutely not her normal training practice. This wasn't her own horse, so far as I'm aware, that she was teaching. She has been based with perhaps one of the greatest Olympians of our time, a man called Carl Hester, who's an absolutely fabulous horseman based in Gloucestershire, who sort of found Charlotte as a young rider and trained her and even gave her the ride on the Great Vallegro, on which she won 3 Olympic gold medals. So he is, he's a sort of pin-up boy for kind horsemanship. He's got a great eye for a great eye for talent. He's a big believer in letting his horses be horses and have plenty of time out in the field. He has media, sponsors, visitors to his yard all the time. He's incredibly open to showing people what he does and how he does things. So given that Charlotte is his sort of right-hand woman, it's just profoundly shocking, because all of us know that she is working with an eminent and very kind horseman. So to find, even if it was an isolated incident, that she's behaved like this at all is just really shaken people.
Now, Lucy, some people will infer from this that the whole sport of dressage may be cruel to horses. To some, people may find it quite unnatural, that a horse might move in that way, would learn how to essentially dance, I guess, for want of another word. What would you say to those people, Lucy?
It's not unnatural. I actually ride a horse who offers me some of those movements quite often when he's excited. A lot of horses have them in it, have these movements in them. Not all horses are bred to do it, are bouncy, are comfortable on their hocks, have the natural spring. So the horses that reach the high levels that you see riders like Charlotte doing in dressage are very much sort of selected and purpose-bred to have incredible natural energy that can be trained and managed over years and years and years to do these clever manoeuvres. It's really absolutely not cruel when you do it properly with a horse who enjoys it. Absolutely no point forcing any horse who doesn't enjoy it to do it, as there's no point forcing a horse to go around the Grand National. Certain horses love that, just as certain people love running marathons and others would rather eat their own head than run a marathon. So the same applies in horse sport as well. Some horses are made for it and love it and some don't. But it would be tragic if people inferred that dressage is an unkind sport, because there are tens of thousands of people in this country who are actually making their horses stronger easier and more supple and giving them a better long-term life because they are doing gentle
which is why I suppose that the people of the Olympics have come down on this as hard as they have. Lucy Higginson, thank you so much for joining us, former editor of Horse and Hound.
Yes, that's all for this hour. Stay with us. We're going to bring you the latest on the ground on that shocking stabbing in Kent, which left a soldier with serious injuries. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Fine at first for many of us today, with some warm sunshine, especially in the east, although there will be the odd shower here as well. It then turns cloudier from the west by the end of the day as a frontal system pushes some outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland, West Wales, western parts of England and Scotland. Already the skies are turning cloudy in the west, and by the afternoon some outbreaks of rain arrive into the west of Wales, Cornwall, Northern Ireland. Western Scotland, odd shower, and the odd shower in the east of England as well. But actually here, plenty of sunny spells and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24 to 25 Celsius across a wide area, 26 in one or two spots. Cooler in the west as the cloud thickens and these outbreaks of rain turn up. Some heavy bursts into the southwest by the evening, and the rain will be fairly showery, so it'll be on and off, but there will be a lot of rain around, and that rain heading into Cumbria, southwest and west Scotland, Northern Ireland by the evening. Eastern Scotland clinging on to some late sunshine, highs here of 20 Celsius, 17 by the evening. And into the evening, many areas will see that cloud thicken as the frontal system moves west to east. And we're going to see those outbreaks of rain continuing, with the cloud progressively lowering through the night to result in widespread hill fog and coastal mist by dawn. With the extensive cloud cover and a southwesterly airflow, temperatures will stay up in the mid-teens. So a relatively mild night and a warmish start to Thursday, even if it is gloomy out there. It will be particularly grotty around southwestern shores with a lot of mist and low cloud, some early drizzle, some outbreaks of more heavy rain moving along the south coast, showery further north, and some brighter spells emerging towards the end of the day.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far, and it could be yours. Charles was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
I'm Charles. I won £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 24th of July. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Now, a soldier is left with serious injuries in hospital after reports of what is being described as a frenzied knife attack outside of his army barracks in Kent. We're going to bring you the latest on the ground.
Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer gets tough on his rebel MPs, suspending 7 who broke ranks and voted to scrap the policy on 2 child benefits. This comes as he held his first Prime Minister's questions since the general election.
And if you're struggling to get a doctor's appointment, it might get a whole lot worse because GPs are set to cut the number of appointments they offer each day, this in further rows over pay. Should patients suffer on behalf of the NHS? We'll put it to a GP. Concerning. This is quite concerning, isn't it, really? If GPs do cut down on the number of appointments that they're able to give, we're already in crisis territory when it comes to this. I mean, for a lot of people, it's a bit of a postcode lottery, to be fair, but for a lot of people, they find it hard enough as it is to get one. Is that a good, tool to use?
It's really difficult because GPs are obviously most people's sort of only entrant point to the entire health system. Of course, you can go to A&E, but we know the crisis in our A&Es as well. If you want to access the NHS, you go through this sort of gatekeeping that is housed by GPs. And we know how some GPs have been really opposed to opening it up, for example, to pharmacists being able to prescribe common medicines. And I do worry that actually sometimes this can feel a bit like a gatekeeping exercise and a protected industry in what could be a more open way of doing things.
I'm just sick of patients being used as bargaining tools with all these pay disputes. Because who are the big losers? The big losers are all of us who want to use the NHS and want to get care. I mean, how many stories of people, GPs missing diagnosis or people not being seen quick enough and then they find out that their cancer has got worse or they find out that they're not going to be having this operation, for months on end. And GPs, as you say, they're the first point of call for many people who want to access a treatment, sometimes for life-threatening diseases and the like. Yes, should GPs be using patients as a bargaining tool?
It's a big question, and should there be restrictions on what sort of restrictions GPs can place on their patients? gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved, as always. All that to come after your headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you very much and good afternoon. We start this news bulletin with some breaking news. An 8-year-old boy has died after he was pulled from the River Arrow in Alcester on Monday evening. He's been named as Joshua Hillstead. It's understood the boy died from complications resulting from drowning. That is according to Warwickshire Police. We'll bring you more on this breaking story as we get it. In other news, police in Kent say the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Gillingham is not terror-related. Officers are continuing their investigations after witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening in Gillingham. Locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. GB News understands it's not being treated as terror-related. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says speculation regarding a motive should be avoided.
This is an appalling attack on a serving soldier. My thoughts go to him and to his family, wishing him a speedy recovery. This is an ongoing police investigation by Kent Police. It's really important that they have everyone's support in this investigation. But this was a just appalling attack on a serving soldier, and I know that the whole country will be thinking of him and his family and wishing him a speedy recovery.
In other news, Sir Keir Starmer accused the previous government of losing control of Britain's borders as he took part in his first PMQs as Prime Minister. Reform UK's Rupert Lowe quizzed the PM on Labour's migration plans, claiming that failure to control the borders has damaged and disrupted communities. The Prime Minister conceded that small boat crossings in the Channel are a serious issue, but laid blame on the Tories.
I'm not sure I agree with his numbers, but look, I do think that it's serious that the previous government lost control of our borders. Record numbers have crossed the Channel. Since the Leader of the Opposition, when he was Prime Minister for 18 months, 50,000 people crossed the Channel. It's a serious issue that requires a serious answer. And that is why we will set up our Border Security Command to take down the gangs that are running this vile trade. What we won't do is waste further time on a gimmick that cost a fortune and remove just 4 volunteers.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak used today's Prime Minister's questions to call for tougher sanctions on Russia. The leader of the opposition said the work of the previous government had laid the groundwork for stronger action against Moscow, which he says would help fund Ukraine's reconstruction. And taking a lighter tone as well, the former Prime Minister joked as he sent best wishes to Britain's Olympians.
And I also join with the Prime Minister in his warm words about our Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
I've no doubt that after years of training, focus and dedication, they'll bring back many gold medals. Although, to be honest, I'm probably not the first person they want to hear advice from on how to win. But I'm glad in our exchanges.
Nominations open this evening to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly announced last night he's running to take the party's top job. In a video emphasising his credentials, the former Foreign and Home Secretary said the Tories need to re-establish a reputation as the party that helps grow the economy and achieve their aspirations. He's the first to announce a leadership bid, and any challengers will need to get in quick before nominations close on Monday. GB News spoke with members of the public in Stamford about their thoughts on who they think should be Tory leader.
Oh, I think they should go bankrupt. That'd be rather lovely. There's very few decent people in the Tory party. I certainly don't want Liz Truss or Johnson back again.
Well, they should be looking to appeal to their core voters and the policies that they present. Taxation for one issue, a main issue, a reason why I failed to vote for them this time.
There are no statesmen anymore. I don't consider Starmer to be a statesman or statesman material.
And in the US, President Biden will address the nation from the Oval Office later as a poll puts Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump. Joe Biden's presumed successor has a 2-point lead over the Republican nominee, according to a poll by Reuters and Ipsos. That's a change from last week when Trump was 2 points ahead of the president. It comes as Mr. Trump files a complaint with the US Election Commission in an attempt to stop Joe Biden's election funds being transferred to his vice president's campaign. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2, and as you've been hearing, a British Army soldier is in hospital with serious injuries after being stabbed near Brompton Barracks in Kent last night.
Kent police say the incident is not thought currently to be terror-related, as detectives are now investigating whether it may be due to mental health issues.
OK, and a 24-year-old local man was arrested after reportedly leaving the scene of the stabbing on a moped.
Well, GBNews Home and Security Editor Mark White is at the scene with all the very latest details. Mark.
Well, of course, that investigation well underway at the moment. The police say they have not found any terrorist motivation, but that might change in the hours and days ahead, depending on what else they unearth. And clearly, as you mentioned in the introduction there, they are looking at potential mental health issues. But that, of course, doesn't exclude that someone with mental health issues or not may have been motivated or influenced by another party or an ideology. So that will all be investigated in the days and weeks ahead. What we've had happening today, this afternoon in particular, are forensic teams arriving here to carry out a methodical search, inch by inch search of the scene where this horrific stabbing took place just before 6 o'clock last night. And one local resident, just a couple of doors up from where we are, captured the commotion on a door cam video camera. You don't see the incident, but you can absolutely hear it, and a warning to our viewers and listeners that it is very distressing to listen to. Well, I mean, absolutely traumatic to just listen to those screams that doorbell cam. And the doorbell camera belonged to Alex Reynolds' neighbours, I say, just a couple of doors up. And despite the obvious potential dangers of going forward, he wanted to go and just check out exactly what was happening here. And he wasn't at all prepared for what he saw, which was clearly a very gruesome scene.
Thought immediately that it was perhaps just a scuffle in the street, perhaps on the neighbouring street. But as the screams became more harrowing and piercing, you realised that it was something more serious. I think initially my father said not to go out, but a minute later I went out to sit to the corner and could see a good 6 or 7 people around the victim, around the body. There was
trousers on. Alex said that he saw that this officer had a uniform on as well, so he clearly concluded that he was a member of the military. This area, of course, is home to a majority of military families. Alex Reynolds and his wife Natasha are just two of a small number of residents who are not in the military. Well, Natasha Reynolds was coming home as this incident was unfolding as well, and this is what she told me of what she saw and heard as she arrived.
I was driving back home from work, and as soon as I turned on the road I saw plenty of cars, and I thought something happened. When I approached the house I saw people standing and lots of police, ambulance, and also my family was standing outside, and they said there was a stabbing here. I was really shocked because this is something unusual for this area.
Well, the victim, who's in his 40s, is a serving officer in the military. That confirmed by the Chief of the General Staff, the head of the army, and all of the support and prayers going towards this army officer as he remains in a serious but stable condition in hospital today.
Well, thank you very much for bringing us the latest from the scene. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor.
Now, in other news, the Labour MP suspended last night over rebelling over that 2-child benefit cap says she was the victim of a macho virility test.
Haven't heard that one before. Macho virility test. Zara Sultana and 6 others were stripped of the whip for backing an SNP motion to abolish the welfare limit.
Well, the SNP says that Labour has failed its first major test in government by choosing not to deliver meaningful change from years of what the SNP describes as Tory misrule.
Well, chief political commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul, joins us now. John, were there always signs that Sir Keir Starmer was so ruthless?
Well, increasingly so, yes. I think it turned out that he's much more ruthless than he appears on the surface. He excluded his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, from the Parliamentary Labour Party and then expelled him. And this is the latest example of striking hard and early against the rebellious tendency in the new Parliamentary Labour Party.
Is it that unusual, though? Of course, Boris removed over 20 of his own MPs after breaking the whip on a no-deal Brexit. John Major, of course, kicked out the Maastricht rebels. We can find examples of the whip being suspended under every Prime Minister.
Oh, absolutely. But those were huge constitutional issues that you were just talking about. This is a matter of policy, and it's actually, curiously enough, a matter of policy where there isn't that much difference between the two sides. I mean, Keir Starmer sometimes suggests that he would like to lift the two-child benefit limit. It's just that he can't afford to at the moment, and he will look at it later. Whereas the rebels want to do it now and spend £3 billion a year on it. The problem is that they're trying to amend the King's Speech, which is a symbolic moment that sets out the government's agenda, a newly elected government, after an election campaign in which Keir Starmer made it crystal clear that he wasn't going to lift the two-child benefit straight away, and therefore he's decided that he wants to make an example of them.
Yes, that he chose to do this when he has such a huge majority and there was no real threat to his power, like in previous cases perhaps, says something. A lot of people on the left saying that he's gone full Soviet, that he's a control freak, that he doesn't want any dissent within the party. The evidence actually backs that now, does it not, John?
Well, the evidence backs the fact that he is a strong leader who is prepared to assert his leadership over his party. I mean, Tony Blair had exactly the same problem. He said that as soon as he tried to take the whip away from people, he was accused of being Stalin and a control freak. Control freak is another favourite word. But that is how you run a political party. You have to have discipline. We've seen what happens to a political party which doesn't have discipline in the Conservative Party over the past 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it could be argued that perhaps the pendulum has swung rather far the other direction now, and there perhaps is a happy medium somewhere. Although I suppose that the point about this being on a King's Speech, there is a sort of constitutional principle that you don't amend your own government's King's Speech, or you don't try to. There is precedent of people losing the whip over that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is one of those sort of symbolic moments. It's like budget resolutions. You don't vote against the government on questions of the budget and or anything that the government declares is an issue of confidence. And I think the whips did make it clear to several Labour MPs that they regarded this as an issue of confidence in the government. If it's an issue of confidence in the government, then you must expect consequences if you vote against your instructions.
And John, just lastly, do you reckon he'll end up scrapping this cap on child benefit?
Not in a hurry, to be honest, because I don't think there is any money. And if there is any money, which Rachel Reeves is going to raise from stealth taxes after she's announced her review next week of how things are far worse than she thought they could possibly have been, she is going to raise stealth taxes in her budget, possibly in September. But there are going to be so many other priorities that she has to fix. I mean, we've seen the state of the prisons, we've seen the pressures for defence spending, and all the rest of it. I think it's going to be a little while before she'll be able to find the money to spend on this one.
Well, if I was going to be like a formerly bet-happy Tory MP, I might suggest that I think it's more likely than not that this will be scrapped before the end of the Parliament. Perhaps not in the first couple of years, though.
I'll remember that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to put my name on the record on that. I think it will happen.
Yeah.
John Rentoul, thank you so much for joining us, chief political commentator at The Independent, of course.
Now, in other news, the notorious Islamist preacher Andrew Choudary was found guilty of directing a terrorist organisation and encouraging support for it through online meetings yesterday.
Well, he faces life in prison after he was convicted yesterday of taking a caretaker role in an Islamist group.
Well, Dominic Lemansky is a journalist who has known Andrew Choudary for 20 years. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've been reporting on this man, as we say, for many a year. Tell us something about him that we might not know. Just how prolific was he as an Islamist preacher in this country?
Well, my involvement with him goes back almost 20 years. I think since about 2006. Just the sheer number of terrorists that have been linked to him over the years, never failed to amaze me. That I could go to a coffee shop and meet with Anjem and end up speaking to a young man who, a few years down the line, would go and fight for ISIS.
It is extraordinary that this was a man who was almost hiding in plain sight. He had previous convictions, and yet he was still wandering around on the streets, spewing what he was always spewed, his support for the 9/11 terrorists, his associations with those who went off to fight for ISIS, and of course the conviction that has now befallen him, directing and encouraging support for al-Mujahirun. What is al-Mujahirun?
Well, al-Mujahirun is an extremist group of Islamist fanatics. It supposedly operates under a covenant of security, whereby it promises not to, harm the life or the well-being of the citizens it lives within. Unfortunately, the people that have been associated with it, acolytes of Anjem, disciples, followers, have taken his radical message and gone on to engage in physical criminal terrorist acts. So it was far more than the talking shop that Anjem tried to sell it as.
I tell you what, it makes people so angry that this man was allowed to spew this hatred, support for a caliphate, support for terrorism in the name of Islam in this country for so long. Why was he let out of prison to begin with, and early?
Well, I think that comes down to that's our laws. I think he got 5 years from my memory. He served half of it. He came out on license. There was a period when he was free, but he couldn't speak to the media or speak publicly or hold events. You'd have to go to the CPS and the courts and ask that, because he served his time for his first sentence. I know he didn't particularly enjoy it, but he became accustomed to it. He was in a separation centre, and he was more than willing to speak to me about it once he was released. And once his ban on speaking in public ended. What does amaze me is when I've listened back to tapes the last day or two since he was convicted, is that he almost predicted his own downfall about 3 years ago, speaking about how the American authorities were responsible for Abu Hamza's downfall. He was predicted his own.
Very interesting that he compared himself to Abu Hamza. What else did he tell you as soon as he was able to speak?
He was always very keen to walk around his local area. Last time I saw him, it was Ilford. Over the years, it changed. It went from Whitechapel to Leighton to Walthamstow. In Leighton, he always wanted to meet in a park, which I always thought was a bit strange. I think it was Drapers in Fields, as if he was worried that someone might be bugging him. It was always in an open space. And then all these
Dominic,
years down
sorry
the
to
line,
interrupt, but why do you think he wanted to speak to you?
I think he enjoyed the attention. I think he enjoyed being listened to. You know, I think he really, you know, being a troublemaker. I don't know where his sort of tradition, where him looking for a traditional job and a career went wrong, because he's a, you know, intelligent man, charismatic man, but decided to put it to this use of radicalizing young people into a very sort of toxic and extreme brand of Islam. Simply comes down to, I think, attention and popularity within and power within his circle.
Well, Dominic Lemansky, it's been fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming on, for speaking to us, and for your journalism.
Yes, thank you. It'd be very interesting to have some kind of psychology test on Andrew Choudary. Certainly a massive ego. Coming up, GPs are threatening to cut patient appointments in further rows about pay. We're going to speak to one GP straight after this.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Now, the last time we spoke, we always talk about the topic of gender and your transition. So talk to me about now, though. What you've done is you've created a comic book about your life and about your transition to tell us things that perhaps the press and media don't talk about.
Yes, so throughout the years, I have always been persuaded to write a book, but I was never ready to disclose so much. And I've been working this beautiful comic book. I brought you a little copy. It's here. You can have a look into it later, where I'm detailing past experiences, growing up in Brazil and then moving to this country, and my struggles, the struggles that I had to go through to become the woman that I'm today. I'm a woman. I'm not a biological woman, but I am a woman. I just cannot have babies because I don't have the female organs, but I'm a woman inside out, therefore I use the female toilet. But what has been going on around, there are a lot of people, they regard themselves as being transgender when they're actually not. They don't have any psychological help, they don't have any medical help. They just wear female clothes and makeup and they call themselves female. And they're the ones using female spaces and take advantage of that. And that is what should stop and be controlled.
But that's the problem, isn't it? So what do you do to stop that? I mean, the suggestion was a third extra space. How would you feel about a third extra space where, you know, this is where if somebody is trans or any of those other things can use rather than using the female toilet?
I don't think that would work, actually, because these people that those people that regard themselves as being females in their minds, they still would use the female toilet.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past 2. Now, GPs will see fewer patients under new plans to protest over pay demands.
Family doctors are set to vote on whether to take part in national collective action, which may see more patients not being able to see a GP.
Goodness me, did you think the strikes were over? Well, potentially not. Joining us now is GP David Lloyd. David, what is this dispute all about?
It's all about the future of general practice, really. I could go on and on about it, so I don't want to bore you, but GPs are, in case you didn't know, most GPs are what we call independent contractors. So they're actually private doctors who contract the NHS and run small businesses. And this particular work to rule is about those doctors. I was one of them for 40 years before I became a sort of traveling doctor. So I can tell you that that's the way it works. You're trying to make money, you're trying to make a profit, and using that profit to run your business. And that model is an old model. It's time for it to go. But the BMA is a very powerful union and would like it to stay, of course, because that's what their members would like.
But is it fair to threaten to essentially cap the number of patients they'll see? This is one of the options that's being put forward to be voted on by these doctors. I mean, that could leave many people without appointments. That could worsen the state of the NHS. Surely, I mean, not to be naive, but it's not a very nice thing to do, is it, David?
Yeah, but that's what unions do, and that's what people do. We've got a new government. Everybody's trying to get their oar in so that they can get a slice of the pie, a dwindling slice of the pie, because we're in such dire financial straits in this country. So you can understand why they want to get in early. They're not actually threatening to do anything that isn't in the contract. And also, it's been an increasing realization that doctors need to have a safe limit.
Well, they're threatening to do the bare minimum. They're threatening to do the bare minimum. So absolutely no extra work, nothing outside the contract at all, which could lead to a third less patients being seen in a day. I mean, we often talk about how doctors go above and beyond, how they work crazy hours, how, they're the most fantastic service that we have in this country, but willing to just do the bare minimum regardless of all the waiting lists.
Yes, and I think that's the discourse that goes on at the moment. The junior doctors have said the same thing, but every part of society are putting the demands on this government as you would expect they would at the very beginning of this government. So it's a not unexpected thing. But yes, I totally agree. For the last 10 years as a full-time partner in general practice, I was seeing 10,000 patients a year, which is 230 a week, or 50 a day. Now they want to restrict it to 25 contacts a day. So you can see where the mismatch is. But the key thing is that the model is wrong. We should be having GPs and hospitals working closer together. We should have a system that doesn't duplicate, that works together and produces better care for patients. And we should have a government that commits itself to preventing illness rather than us constantly having to treat it. So ban smoking, double the price of alcohol, make Ozempic-like drugs available to anybody who's got excess weight. Those are simple things that this government could do at no cost.
Well, I mean, there might be a bit of a cost to doubling the price of alcohol. I mean, of course, there was a pretty large natural experiment in prohibition in the United States of America in the 1920s. How did that go, David?
Well, I'm not proposing doubling it, but there is a very direct correlation between the price of alcohol and alcohol consumption, as you would probably expect. So if you double the price of alcohol, you will reduce the amount of alcohol-related death and alcohol problems by 20%.
People would buy cheaper alcohols rather than more expensive alcohols, maybe brew their own alcohol. Perhaps people would be out there drinking Frosty Jacks rather than a nice glass of rosé.
No, the evidence is firmly in favour of raising the price on alcohol, and also the data is there already on cigarettes, but now let's ban it completely.
OK, well, we moved on quickly from the GP route. Thank you very much, David Lloyd. Great.
See, we've all got to get in there with this new government.
It is true, GPs, they always say to you, the first question, how much do you drink? Be honest. And we all know everyone.
We're never honest.
Everyone slices it in half,
I always double the number. Don't worry, I always double.
Oh, goodness me. David Lloyd, thank you so much for coming on and talking through that dispute.
So if you're actually honest, they're doubling it anyway.
Oh, goodness
there
me.
you go. Coming up,
Quarter it.
Coming up, royal family profits have soared to record highs. We're going to bring you a report outside Buckingham Palace. That's after your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Police in Kent say the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Gillingham is not terror-related. Officers are continuing their investigations after witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening in Gillingham. Locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Sir Keir Starmer accused the previous government of losing control of Britain's borders as he took part in his first PMQs as Prime Minister. Reform UK's Rupert Lowe quizzed the PM on Labour's migration plans, claiming that a failure to control the borders has damaged and disrupted communities. The Prime Minister conceded that channel crossings are a serious issue, but laid blame on the Tories.
I'm not sure I agree with his numbers, but look, I do think that it's serious that the previous government lost control of our borders. Record numbers have crossed the Channel since the Leader of the Opposition, when he was Prime Minister for 18 months, 50,000 people crossed the Channel. It's a serious issue that requires a serious answer. And that is why we will set up our Border Security Command to take down the gangs that are running this vile trade. What we won't do is waste further time on a gimmick that cost a fortune and remove just 4 volunteers.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak used today's PMQs to call for tougher sanctions on Russia. The Leader of the Opposition said the work of the previous government had laid the groundwork for stronger action against Moscow, which he says would help fund Ukraine's reconstruction. And also taking a lighter tone, the former Prime Minister joked as he sent his best wishes to Britain's Olympians.
And I also join with the Prime Minister in his warm words about our Olympic athletes. Yeah. I've no doubt that after years of training, focus and dedication, they'll bring back many gold medals. Although, to be honest, I'm probably not the first person they want to hear advice from on how to win. But I'm glad in our exchanges.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Fine at first for many of us today, with some warm sunshine, especially in the east, although there will be the odd shower here as well. It then turns cloudier from the west by the end of the day as a frontal system pushes some outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland, West Wales, western parts of England and Scotland. Already the skies are turning cloudy in the west, and by the afternoon some outbreaks of rain arrive into the west of Wales, Cornwall, Northern Ireland. Western Scotland, odd shower, and the odd shower in the east of England as well. But actually here, plenty of sunny spells and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24 to 25 Celsius across a wide area, 26 in 1 or 2 spots. Cooler in the west as the cloud thickens and these outbreaks of rain turn up. Some heavy bursts into the southwest by the evening. And the rain will be fairly showery, so it'll be on and off, but there will be a lot of rain around, and that rain heading into Cumbria, southwest and west Scotland, Northern Ireland by the evening. Eastern Scotland clinging on to some late sunshine, highs here of 20 Celsius, 17 by the evening. And into the evening, many areas will see that cloud thicken as the frontal system moves west to east. And we're going to see those outbreaks of rain continuing with the cloud progressively lowering through the night to result in widespread hill fog and coastal mist by dawn. With the extensive cloud cover and a southwesterly airflow, temperatures will stay up in the mid-teens. So a relatively mild night and a warmish start to Thursday, even if it is gloomy out there. It will be particularly grotty around southwestern shores with a lot of mist and low cloud, some early drizzle, some outbreaks of more heavy rain moving along the south coast, showery further north, and some brighter spells emerging towards the end of the day.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. In Perth and Kinross, we've got the usual queues on the M90 northbound at the Broxton roundabout. Queues in Edinburgh on the M8 eastbound at Junction 1, Hermiston Gate. We're seeing slow traffic on the M61 southbound in Manchester at Junction 1, the Swinton interchange. Long delays on the M20 coastbound in Kent due to an earlier accident between Junction 3, the M26 and 4 for Leyburn. That's in the roadworks area. We've got slow traffic on the M25, firstly in Surrey in both directions between the Clackett Lane services and Junction 6 for Godstone. That's in the roadworks area. Also seeing slow traffic on the M25 QE2 bridge clockwise in Essex between Junction 31 Lakeside and 1A for Dartford. And it's slow on the M25 anti-clockwise at Junction 16 the M40. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:39, and we've got a lot of emails coming in on that conversation we had with GP David Lloyd.
We absolutely do. A lot of you not happy with the suggestion of doubling alcohol prices. George has written in to say doubling the price will not reduce alcohol dependency. It hasn't done so in Scotland, where minimum alcohol pricing has not prevented deaths. And actually, Nigel has also got in on this one. Not that Nigel. He said the death rate in Scotland has actually gone up since they introduced minimum alcohol pricing.
Yes, not to get too technical, but for problem drinkers, there's been no difference. In fact, it's got worse. Yes, the overall consumption of alcohol has dropped slightly. But not problem drinkers.
And
it's price inelastic.
Yes.
For people
if
who
you've
are
got
addicted.
a dependency, it doesn't matter the price.
Yeah, well, yeah, within limits. English Rose, I thought that was me, says, blimey, let's just ban everything and live a dull, and she's put a little poo emoji there, life.
Goodness me.
And Grumpy Grandad, thanks for getting in touch again, Grumpy Grandad. Has that doctor ever been in a pub? If he did, he would know it already costs a fortune for a pint. A friend of mine went to an arena gig recently. £13 a pint. These arenas do really take the mick, don't they?
Goodness
they really,
me.
really do. But on the question of GPs, it's clear there is an issue with the model that they're working. I mean, if you have 99% of GPs saying that they don't like the contracts that they're currently on, then you've got a problem. But using patients as a bargaining tool, I can't get behind that.
No. Well, coming up next on the programme is, of course, Martin Daubney. And Martin, what's coming up on your show?
Hello, fellows. Well, it's all about the FBI director today getting cross-examined, grilled, flambéed, probably. In Washington, D.C., of course, the Secret Service director dramatically resigned yesterday, annihilated in the same Congress court in D.C., Capitol Hill. Christopher Wray will be asked about the motives, the potential motives of that attempted assassin, Thomas Matthew Crooks. Was he politically motivated? What was on his mobile phone? What were his last physical movements? Did he send a drone up over the site beforehand? All of those huge questions.
Fascinating.
We're going to get answers
Which we
today.
haven't had any answers to. It's actually quite bizarre that we haven't had any information about this guy.
And it came out that he was a member of the Republican Party. Well, a lot of people join parties to try and impact the leadership. A lot of people joined the Labour Party who weren't Labour supporters. So lots and lots and lots of questions, and it's going to be, I think, as exciting as the other day. It's like the Michael Jackson trial, but for politics. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. Tourist taxes, something that really gets my goat. The tourist tax in Venice in its first month, €5. Guess how much it raised in its first month?
How much?
2.4 million euros in 1 month. That's going to come to London, I reckon. City Carnival series think, ooh, that's easy money. Tourism taxes are coming to the Isle of Skye. Motorhomes are about to be charged to go there. They don't spend enough money on fancy restaurants because guess what? They're motorhomes.
But £5 is not going to stop someone visiting somewhere, is it?
No, but the point is there's a huge wave, as you've been covering on your show so brilliantly, about anti-British backlash of tourists. How soon before we're charged to go to Tenerife or Magaluf?
Oh, do you know what it will be? Because we're British, we'll have the tax, but the French won't, the Portuguese won't.
Brexit tax, I can see it coming. That's all coming 3 till 6.
You can certainly see it coming, can't you? Thanks, Martin. Now, profit from the royal family's property and land holdings has more than doubled to a record £1.1 billion. That's according to Buckingham Palace's annual accounts.
Well, the report includes the cost of the coronation and all the visits made by the royals over the last year. Interesting to note, fewer foreign trips were made in the year to March 2024, of course reflecting a need to stay closer to home during a period in which both the King and the Princess of Wales has spent time in hospital for cancer treatment.
I was also reading that the King has done a whopping 464 engagements in the past year.
Despite
it, yeah.
Amazing.
It's amazing. We're joined now by GB News national reporter Charlie Peters, who is outside Buckingham Palace for us. Thank you, Charlie, for being there. Break this down for us.
Sure, well, let's start with the expenditure, shall we? From the last year, it was £89.1 million. That's what the royal household spent. And one of the core parts of that expenditure was, of course, their big event last May, the coronation. £800,000 went into that. And then we should look at the engagements. You mentioned the number that King Charles made last year. Well, £4.2 million on those engagements, much of that travel. And then finally, how much that costs us all? Well, it's £1.29 per person. That's the cost of the monarchy to the taxpayer. But that really hides the truth of how that cash comes about, because all of the money that the royal household spends is actually theirs being given back to them by the Treasury. It comes from the Crown Estate surplus. That's a £16 billion portfolio they have, and their sovereign grant is made up of the surplus from 2 years prior. So in the year to 2022, there was about £350 million knocking around from the surplus. That was given all to the Treasury, and they were given back 15% as their core sovereign grant. Additional 10% was given towards the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace. That's been going on since Parliament voted on it in 2017. It's expected to take 10 years. But all in all, that's been about £86.3 million. And as you heard, the expenditure was £89 million. So how do they mix that gap? How do they close that gap in and cost out? Well, they make their own money as well from additional sources of income. And that was the gates, the receipt to Windsor Castle and their many palaces across the country, where people have paid about £10 million to visit in the last year. So what can we glean also from the detail from this extensive report? Well, of that £4.2 million on official engagements, much of that travel, the most expensive trip last year was to Kenya within that financial year for over £170,000 for the 3-day visit. Bit of context to that, about a decade ago, President Obama made a 3-day visit to Ireland, and that cost just under $8 million. So when you look at how world leaders and the head of state might travel, that does give you some understanding of how cost-conscious the royal family has been and how they manage those costs. And they're looking to go further on reducing not only the financial costs of that travel, but also the environmental costs. So sustainable aviation fuel is going to be increased in the charter flights, and also 2 new helicopters that have been ordered this year for the royal family. We know that King Charles, his Aston Martin, his treasured possession from his 21st birthday, that's been running on cheese and wine through a hybrid biofuel for many decades. Well, it looks like he's now bringing that to his own air fleet.
It's a cheese and wine powered helicopter. I can't think of anything more Charles III, really. Charlie, a lot of people think that, of course, the royal family cost the taxpayer lots of money, but actually they're probably the biggest taxpayers in the country.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. It's 85% tax. If you look at how it works, it's the Crown Estate surplus, all the cash they make through their landed portfolio and property, etc., going to the Treasury, and then a portion of it given back to them. And their income actually for the year just gone has doubled, but we won't see that going into the sovereign grant for another 2 years, because it's always based on the financial year 2 years prior. But how has that income doubled? That's a really important detail. The Crown Estate owns all the seabed of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and that seabed's been increasingly popular for wind farms, and we might see Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary's push for more wind farms to boost the royal coffers in years to come. 1.1 billion the income, mostly driven by that sustainable energy source. But as we said, we won't see that money going out to sort Buckingham Palace at its many costs for a couple more years.
Well, Charlie Peters, thank you very much, live from Buckingham Palace.
And we were just told it is National Cheese and Wine Day tomorrow. So that's something to look forward to.
Have to drink some of King Charles's petrol. Now, coming up, nominations for the next Tory leader open tonight. We're in Westminster to discuss those runners and riders.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle has reportedly finished filming her new show for Netflix. It aims to celebrate the joys of cooking, gardening, entertaining and friendship.
Yeah, this comes after Prince Harry's Netflix documentary, The Heart of Invictus, failed to hit the right note with viewers missing out on the top 10 in the streaming charts.
So, will this next venture be a success? Well, joining us now is royal commentator Kinsey Schofield.
I know I've talked to the both of you about Meghan Markle potentially running for president, so this feels like a bit of a dud to go from Meghan Markle running for president to Meghan Markle's Netflix series about friendship and cooking. So she's wrapped this recent show. They rented a home near hers in Montecito so that as their cooking set. And they're saying that this is really make or break for Harry and Meghan when it comes to their Netflix contract.
Do you think, Kinsey, it's fair to say that Meghan Markle has proved to be commercially a bit of a damp squib? Even in America, her native homeland, she's kind of Oprah without the audience when it comes to the cooking. Also, is she kind of, do you think... They saw her as the golden ticket, didn't they, to unlimited revenue, unlimited audiences, and it just hasn't happened.
Look, I think Meghan is a beautiful woman, and I do think she's talented, but I think how you treat people is incredibly important. And not only was she rumored to have been cruel inside Kensington Palace with several bullying allegations, but here in the States, Archwell Productions, their audio section, their scripted section, they've gone through several employees. And I think it's a reflection on the way that people are treated there. And I think as a viewer, you might get that. You might feel that way. And maybe that is where the appeal has been lost.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 to 3, and they're off. James Cleverly is the first Tory leadership hopeful to declare his candidacy to replace Rishi Sunak.
Well, you made that very exciting indeed. He says the Conservative Party has spent too much time rowing and now needs to show more self-discipline.
But former Home Secretary Suella Braverman says the party needs to reject divisive identity politics and woke nonsense in a bid to win back reform voters.
Oh, this is going to get dirty, isn't it?
Well, GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster is in the studio with us. Catherine, only one candidate officially declared, but quite a few obviously running.
Well, yes. I mean, the nominations open this evening. You've got to have got those 10 MPs together. If you can't find 10 people, you are not going to be running. They've got till the end of Monday, and then they will sort of go out touting their wares across the summer. It'll be whittled down to 4 beginning of September. Those 4 will go to conference. We'll have a sort of very public beauty parade. We'll see how much arguing and public fighting there is. And then come November the 2nd, the members get to pick. One point just to make, I was talking to somebody just before Prime Minister's questions, somebody very close to Rishi Sunak and also quite senior in the Conservative Party, and they were saying, I was sort of going, well, how many do you think, half a dozen, maybe? And they were saying, well, it might only be 4, because when you think about it, there's only 121 MPs, and to get 10 each, you know, votes are probably not going to pile up evenly necessarily. So it may be that various names that we might think are going to run ultimately might not make it past that first hurdle. It will be very interesting to see. But certainly James Cleverly, yeah, he thinks that he is a sort of unity candidate. And my goodness, I mean, one of the reasons the Conservatives lost, and of course different MPs will give you different reasons, but one of them surely was the very public infighting and constant sort of war between the various factions. And he thinks he can be a unity figure, but he won't be alone in that.
I mean, Catherine, I predict that it's going to get quite dirty, I said. Maybe catty's a better word. Do you think it will?
I think it already
will. Has, actually.
I mean, I think it always does. And when you look at, you know, the last year and a half that Rishi Sunak had in, there were constantly people from this faction or that faction saying, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And everybody's got their opinions. And of course, every party is a sort of coalition of different wings, but it's very, very public. And I think the problem is at the moment that the Conservative Party, you know, the numbers are so low, they've got to decide how they want to be going forward. And there's not much agreement, like Suella Braverman thinks, go towards reform. There's plenty of others think that's the way to oblivion.
And unusually in this contest, new members will be allowed to vote if they sign up by 7 o'clock this evening, which is an unusual thing, and perhaps it could alter the course of this leadership contest.
Maybe.
Up until 7 p.m, perhaps a flood of new members so that they can vote. Catherine, thank you so much for coming in, discussing that with us this afternoon.
And of course, that's all from us today. Please do join us again, though, tomorrow from 12 o'clock. Up next, it is the marvellous, magnificent Martin Daubney.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Following a bright start to Wednesday in many places, it is now turning increasingly cloudy with outbreaks of rain moving into the west. This frontal system is coming in after a ridge of high pressure led to a fine start, and we'll keep the sunshine in the evening in the east, 1 or 2 showers, but otherwise largely dry, whilst elsewhere thickening areas of cloud, increasingly low cloud as well, leading to widespread mist, hill fog and drizzle across western parts, along with outbreaks of more persistent rain, especially towards the southwest. But with the increased cloud and humidity, it's going to be a mild, some might say muggy night, 16 Celsius by dawn in a few spots. But in the south and especially the southwest, extensive low cloud, mist, hill fog and some more persistent rain pushing into the south of Devon and Cornwall. Across Wales and much of the rest of England, it's cloudy first thing, the worst of the damp and gloomy weather over western hills. Northern Ireland, likewise extensive cloud, a few showers, showery rain affecting western Scotland, but some brightness early on across parts of eastern Scotland. Really limited brightness, to be honest, with a lot of cloud affecting many parts of the UK. And through the morning and early afternoon, we're going to see some heavier and more prolonged bursts of rain affecting southern counties, increasingly pushing east through the day. Elsewhere, skies will turn brighter, the sun will come through in a few spots, but also some showers into the northwest, and feeling cooler because of the increased cloud cover across many parts of the UK. Now we're going to see those outbreaks of rain in the south and southeast continuing into Thursday evening, perhaps turning heavier again for a time, before eventually that clears away. And Friday's effectively a day of sunny spells and showers. The heaviest showers will be in the north, likewise for Saturday, and it will be a bit cooler.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our Super Summer Giveaway. With your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date, which means you get to spend every single penny however